Hello, true believers. My name is Jim, and welcome to BK's Bullets. Today, I'm talking to you guys about this gem right here, Justice League The Nail. Now, I want you to do two things for me. Number one, I want you to subscribe to this channel because Brent's doing some really good stuff and he needs your support. And number two, I want you to close the video if and only if you do not want to have The Nail ruined for you, because the only way I know how to review it is to give away the story and talk about the plot and my opinions on the plot. So, with those things out of the way, spoiler warning, we're going to get into it. A little bit of background of me, if this is the first time you're on this channel. I am Jim Ephantis. I am a huge video game nut. Brent, on the other hand, is a huge comic book nut. When the two forces collide, this video comes to be, and Brent gives me some of his most prized comic books for me to review and read and comment. So I am coming from a history of knowing absolutely nothing about any of this stuff other than the stuff I read when I was a kid. 99% of my comic book knowledge comes from either Brent directly or any of the Marvel/DC movies. So when he told me about this tale, the Elseworld Tales, The Nail, by Alan Davis and Mark Farmer, I was intrigued. A world without Superman, how exciting could that be? Well, I could tell you that it's actually a little too exciting for somebody like me who doesn't really understand a lot of these characters. And I think where the biggest flaw of this comic is, and overall I have to say I did not like it. I disliked it more than I liked it. And the reason I have to say that is because it takes on so much. It doesn't just focus on a couple small characters of how their interaction would be had Superman not come to be. No, it takes a spin on the entire universe, all the characters. There's so many characters in this comic, and the reason I'm sitting in front of my computer, normally I'm upstairs and just talking off the cuff, is because I wanted to open some of these tabs of some of their web pages open to name some of these supporting characters. Big Barda, the Doom Patrol, the Outsiders, including Geoforce, Shade the Changing Man. You have Darkseid, who I've heard of from the Marvel, the DC Injustice video game. Vermin Wunderbar, Ragman, and then the All-Star Squadron. What? Who the hell are these people, and why do I care? This story could have been so much better if they had just focused on a small amount of characters and gave us much more meaningful impact stories. Reading this comic book is like watching a ping pong match with 15 people playing at once. Every 2 pages, it's all over the place, and to me, it turns into an absolute jumbled mess. But I'm going to try to be positive, and I'm going to walk through this with you and give you guys some opinions on some stuff. There's some good stuff and some bad stuff. I really did like the idea. It actually starts off with a really cool quote here, a little short verse from George Herbert called The Nail. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For a want of shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the knight was lost. For want of a knight, the battle was lost. And so the kingdom was lost for the want of a nail. And basically what this story is about is Jonathan and Martha Kent are on their way to Smallville on the fateful day when Superman's ship crash lands into the earth. But because of a nail in their tire, they end up not going out. And in the background, when they go inside to eat some lemonade or drink some lemonade or, I don't know, whatever they decide to do, you could see this meteor crashing to earth, which is Superman. And as such, Superman never gets those wholesome Kent American, red, white, and blue apple pie values. He never grows up to be the Man of Steel, and as a result, he's just not a player in the world. But the world does go on in this Elseworld Tale. You still have the Justice League formed, and everybody, as far as I can tell, the backstory about them, Batman and Joker and Wonder Woman and Green Lantern and some of the other more notable characters like the Flash, you could see their they don't really get into their background, but it's pretty clear they are who they were and normal. The only difference now is the Superman isn't around. So how it kind of starts off, and this is where I think it starts off really, really strong, is it gets into a new and improved Metropolis. Now, Metropolis is the home of Superman, and that's where he, lives, and that's where he kind of protects. Without Superman around, Lex Luthor rises to power and becomes this mayor and turns the entire city into this militarized anti-mutant zone. So anybody who's got superhuman powers is round up. They're not allowed, and as a result, the city flourishes for everyone except for the Justice League. So fast forwarding a little bit, the Justice League starts to get branded as villains. So through a series of somewhat calculated, somewhat random events, slowly, one by one, the Justice League is targeted, both, captured by this evil corporation, this evil Lex Luthor-like militarized state. I say corporation, it really isn't. I guess Lex Tech is his company. Maybe they're kind of involved. But really more than that, it's just the superheroes are slowly getting captured, or they lose their will to fight because the media starts to hate them and they just can't handle it. And I think that's one of the big plot points early on that I had a hard time buying, because you're going to tell me that, Hawk Girl, for example, in this story, Hawkman's dead. They're making fun of Hawk Girl, and she's like, well, you're making fun of me, I'm just going home, and she leaves. I'm like, you're going to tell me that the Justice League of America, this beacon of excellence, is that fed up because one city out of all the cities in the world is deciding to go militarized and anti-mutant? If that was the case, the X-Men would never exist, because the X-Men are always being persecuted. That's why Charles Xavier built this mansion for a secret community of them. So why the Justice League are being such a bunch of babies? I really had a hard time with that, and I feel like had the comic focused more on that early on, I feel like it would have set up a better premise. But no, we're just supposed to believe that all these people just lost their heart. Now, the Green Arrow is one of the ex-Justice Leaguers. He's on TV. It looks like he's missing an arm. His eye's messed up. I think he always was missing an eye. I'm not sure. But he's deranged. He was part of the Justice League. He is this leader of this anti-movement. Unfortunately, his story arc is only 3 pages, and then he completely vanishes. And again, this is the other part of the comic book that I didn't necessarily like, is that you build up this amazing story based on these small premises with all these loose ends. Now, I understand that there is a Nail Part 2. Brent didn't give me that, and from what I heard, it's not that great. But I can tell you the first Nail wasn't that great. You have a lot of loose ends in there in which you have characters that just vanish. Then we start getting into a lot of these ancillary stories, and I honestly couldn't even begin to analyze these for you because I have no idea who the hell these people are. The comic book just assumes you know that who these people are, and it's not on the comic book to explain to me who they are. So that I'm going to take not as a criticism. That's just my ignorance on comics. I don't know who, again, Star Spangled Kid or Robot Man or Phantom Lady are. They sound like reject characters, but they are in the comics, so it's important to understand that. But slowly their will is broken and they all are getting kidnapped. Now, the highlight of this entire comic book absolutely has to be the fight with Joker. And what Joker does is somehow he gets Kryptonian-powered gauntlets. We don't know how. It's not explained to us. But he basically does this huge battle royale inside Arkham Asylum. He lures Batman in and puts his giant force field around it. And Joker forces everybody to fight to the death. And through this, both Robin and Batgirl are murdered in front of Bruce Wayne, and he can't stop it. Joker's got these gauntlets that he can control, put people in force fields and all that kind of stuff. He literally eviscerates them, and Batman is forced to watch, and he breaks. He's crying. He can't believe it. He goes back to the Batcave. He's having a hard time with it. And to me, make a story about that. That was fascinating. That hit me in the feels. I really felt for Batman, and he didn't turn to the Justice League for help really until the very end. He was kind of sitting there by himself, which, again, I know a lot of them were starting to get rounded up, but the Justice League just wasn't portrayed well in this. Where's the group of super friends when you need them most? And why aren't they there to comfort him? He takes this loss very hard. And to me, that was really the highlight of the story. Now, there's a little side story where Catwoman becomes Batwoman to honor her memory, I guess. Catwoman doesn't want to be bad anymore. But it felt so rushed with a lot of the rest of the villains where it was just very hard to kind of take everything in. There's a lot of cameos in here, too. I know Jimmy Olsen turns out to be the big bad in this. I know Jimmy Olsen is just normally like this little pimsqueak Superman sidekick. So I guess it was a big swerve that he was secretly controlling Lex Luthor, and he was the mastermind behind all this. What it boils down to, and this whole idea of Superman being gone, is that somehow they're able to clone Superman and make these robot Supermen, or I don't know if they're robots or they were just clones, called the Liberators. They appear throughout the comic book. It's very clear to me that Superman isn't gone. I had assumed when this started that the nail would be about Superman's dead. Just he died. The meteor crashes and the little baby dies, and Superman never comes to be. But no, there's a lot of hints in here that, you know, something bigger's going on. How is this thing so fast? Or how is it so strong? Or who has the ability to do this? Well, Superman does. Well, maybe not the actual Superman, but the clone of Superman, these Liberators, are out going around doing all this stuff. And they're the ones that are ultimately the muscle behind the militarized Metropolis Zone. And ultimately, it looks like all hope is lost. The Justice League is slowly being picked apart, dismantled, and it boils down to this fight between Jimmy Olsen and who is he fighting? See, this is what I mean. This is where it screws my mind up. Green Lantern and oh yes, I remember. So Green Lantern imbues Batman, who's now in a vengeance. Batman gets the power. He's fighting, but Green Lantern can't sustain he can't give his energy to Batman long enough because he fades out. He can't be connected to the lantern to get more ring power. And what ends up happening is the grand finale is when all hope is lost, Superman shows up, Amish Superman, who's just some guy who's like, hey, you know, I can't let this happen anymore. He fights and destroys Jimmy Olsen, and then the last scene shows Superman dressed up as Superman, and ta-da, the world is right. You assume that everything is course corrected. Superman goes on to lead the Justice League to many heroic battles, and he's the greatest of all time, and la 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 in the end. And it's just, I don't know. I could sit here, I'm looking at the clock, I'm trying to keep this brief, so I'm going to wrap this up. I could have really gotten more into this story, I think, had they not done this false swerve of Superman being gone. Like I said, it was very clear to me early on. There's a lot of silhouettes of guys in capes or quotes of Superman. Like, I intentionally know they were trying to foreshadow his return. It was almost as if these guys, when writing The Nail, were just dabbling with it, and then halfway through they're like, you know what, we're going too far. We shouldn't. We should really try to course correct this story. And instead of just owning a world, a bleak, dark, hopeless world, they instead make the Justice League come off as a bunch of inner whining bunch of boobs. They're all complaining and whining about how they're not valued. They all, when all hope is lost, they all revert back to their homes. Aquaman goes back in the water. Hawkgirl flies away. Martian Manhunter leaves. He does come back. But there's a lot of just there's never this cohesion of a team that when I was reading the New 52 for a while, the Justice League, I mean, they were on it. They all worked together. They were all coordinated. They had each other's back. When put up against a big evil or a big villain, they always found a way to persevere. This Justice League is broken and battered from the beginning. All the horrible events that happen, all the characters throughout, all the villains that die, all the random people that die that turn on each other, not even Justice League related, just shows how bleak this world is. And I guess if you want to consider this almost a satire of how bad the world would be because there's not the fear of big bad Superman to kind of keep things in check, I guess I can maybe get on board with that, and maybe it just went over my head. I mean, that's perfectly possible too. But I think if you are a huge comic book fan, you'll probably appreciate this story a bit more because you'll get to see all these other villains dying and fighting against each other, and you're going to get to see the likes of Commander Steel and let me pull some more off this list because I was just blown away. How about the Chief or Beast Boy? You want to know what happens to Beast Boy? So to me, great idea, atrocious execution. This is The Nail. I would love to see this story rewritten with a much smaller scope, with a much more emphasis on what the real Justice League is. None of these bozos that I don't care about. I would love to see more of the darkness and despair of a world without Superman, or alternatively, show me a world in which without Superman, the world finds a way to thrive and exist. But, you know, in light of the Action Comics 1000 and the return to Superman, it only seems fitting that we see a world without Superman. Clearly doesn't work. And there you guys have it, my review of the Nail. Probably more of a whine fest than anything. Come at me, bro, in the comments. You tell me why I'm wrong. I'll defend it. I could have got much more in the weeds on this, and I really am trying to limit what I say about it. I will say, though, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Good for you. You made it to the end. Again, do my friend Brent a favor. Subscribe to his channel. Follow him on Twitter. Follow him on Instagram, wherever the hell he is or whatever the hell he's doing. It's really important to grow some of these smaller channels. He's a great guy, a true believer, a true fan of comic books. And with that, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Get out there and support your favorite Elseworld tales. And until next time, I will see you guys in the funny pages.